And I also want to do it on my film. It'll take me just a minute to get back. Okay, I turned my camera on, so we'll get you a copy of this somehow. But what I wanted to do is to, first of all, just introduce you to something that I've been pretty active in the last year, and see if you have some interest in it. And if you do, then there's a lot more that you would have to do. It's a pretty complicated area, and yet the application for coaches is relatively simple. But I think you need to have some background in order to really be effective with it. The second thing is that I kind of want to educate myself through this. I'm hoping that we strike up some interest or say some things or show you some things that will cause you to try to get more information out of me, because I've got a lot of it, but I can't, we can't cover it all. I've got what I'm going to tell you probably will take me 20, 25 minutes. And then we can go into question and answer after that. But I also got a sheet here of things that are notes that I've had that if I get a chance, I'm going to try to work them in. I don't know if I'll get that chance, because I don't want to take up all kinds of your time. As you noticed, we are recording this, and I am doing it on film. So if it records properly, I will have it probably on YouTube by tomorrow. And I tell you that now because there's going to be some terms and things that you may not have a chance to write down, because I'm not going to use many gimmicks on this. It's going to be mostly talk. I've got a few things that I'm going to show you, pictures that I'm going to show you, but you won't, it's good for you to see them, but there's probably not a lot that you have to write down. But if there is something, you will have access to it on YouTube, I'm hoping. If not, I'll have it on my camera, but you'll hear my voice, but you won't be able to hear, to see anything on your computer. But I would have the film on YouTube also. So we should have everything taken care of. I'm going to start with, and I will preface it by saying I really feel strongly about what this is all about. It's about the mind and the brain. There is tremendous, just unbelievable amount of literature right now. You could spend 40 hours a week for the next year and you wouldn't get through it all. It's just been bombarded by, and I'm going to explain it in just a little bit, by a change in the scientific thinking of how the brain operates. It affects, in my opinion, coaches. Now, some coaches and most coaches are just going to poo-poo it, just like they do statistics. But not even 10 years ago, I've been doing my statistical stuff for 30 years. And when I would talk to anybody, they would literally laugh. That stuff, it doesn't work. All of that And now, of course, there's all kinds of people involved in the statistical avenue. I think the same thing is going to be true of the use of the mind. I'm going to start with this story, and you have to listen very carefully and try to kind of visualize things, and don't have an open mind towards this. Because the mind and the brain are really complex issues, difficult to understand. Very, very learned people struggle with it just like we do. It's an unbelievable instrument that we have in our head here. We really don't need anything besides what's in our head. But the story exemplifies how it can affect what we do. But when you hear it and you get to the end of it, you may be perplexed. So let me just read this to you and try to keep as attentive as you can. First of all, this is a guy that is a German philosopher. It was long before World War II when this occurred. He went to Japan on a teaching assignment, evidently a fairly long one. And when he got there, he wanted to learn Zen because he didn't understand it, or none of us do probably. But they told him that the best way is to do it as an activity. And in the Zen way of doing things, there's about 4 or 5 ways you can do an activity to learn what Zen is about. And painting is one of them, dance is one of them, martial arts is one of them, the tea ceremony is one of them, and archery. But he had to get permission from a master archery teacher. And they didn't want to do it. He didn't feel a Western person could learn, could adapt to this. But he finally got one, and he got the very best, because a lot of people were helping him. He worked with him for 5 years. The first 3 years that he was in these archery classes, he was shooting at a bale of hay 10 feet away because the master didn't really care if he was hitting anything. It was not his technique, that's part of it too, but his mental approach. We're talking about some time ago, but I'll tell you in advance, the ancients had this figured out 2,500 years ago. Our scientists are just now coming to grips with it. So this occurred probably about in the 4th year, somewhere in the around there. He was having trouble with releasing the arrow because in their method of archery, they don't shoot like most people. You know, you aim down the arrow. Their release hand is actually over their head, and they really can't sight, the target. But he now was working with regular targets. So he said, one day, this is him talking, I asked the master, how can the shot be loosed if I do not do it? The master saying, you don't release it. You'll hear the rest of it. The master says, it shoots. Then the guy says, I have heard you say that several times before, so let me put it another way. How can I wait self-obliviously for the shot if I am no longer there. It waits, this is the master, at the highest tension. There's a lot of tension with those bows were very strong. But he'd gotten by that part of it. And who or what is this it? And the master says, once you have understood that, you will have no further need of me. And if I tried to give you a clue at the cost of your own experience, and this is good for coaches, I would be the worst of teachers and would deserve to be sacked. So let's stop talking about it and go on to practicing. That's a little buildup. This occurred not long before the big part of it. So now we're at maybe a month later. The master, long accustomed to my tiresome questions, shook his head. I do not deny, he said after a short silence, that there may be something in what you say. I do stand facing the goal in such a way that I am bound to see it, even if I do not intentionally turn my gaze in that direction. On the other hand, I know that this seeing is not enough, decides nothing, explains nothing, for I see the goal as I did not see it. They don't sight like normal archers do. They don't, it's their mind that has to get all of this accomplished. So it's very difficult for them to sight because of how the arrow is off on this angle. Now he says, the German guy, then you ought to be able to hit it blindfolded, I jerked out. The master turned on me a glance which made me fear that I had insulted him, and then said, come to see me this evening. He goes. I seated myself opposite him on a cushion. He handed me tea, but did not speak a word. So we sat for a long while. There was no sound but the singing of the kettle on the hot coals. At last the master rose and made me a sign to follow him. The practice hall was brightly lit. The master told me to put a taper, long and thin as a knitting needle, in the sand in front of the target, but not switch on the light in the target stand. It was so dark that I could not even see its outline, and if the tiny flame of the taper had not been there, I might perhaps have guessed the position of the target, though I could not have made it out with any precision. The master danced the ceremony. Everything they did, there was a ritual coming up to it. It was a Zen way of approaching it. Part of it was this sitting quietly with the teacup. And then they had a ritual. It doesn't describe it here, it does in the book. His first arrow shot out of dazzling brightness into deep night. I knew from the sound that it had hit the target. The second arrow was a hit too. When I switched on the light in the target stand, I discovered to my amazement that the first arrow was lodged full in the middle of the black, while the second arrow had splintered the butt of the first and plowed through the shaft before embedding itself beside it. I did not dare to pull the arrows out separately, but carried them back together with the target. The master surveyed them critically. The first shot, he then said, was no great feat. You will think, because after all these years I'm so familiar with my target stand that I must know, even in pitch darkness, where the target is. That may be, and I won't try to pretend otherwise. But the second arrow, which hit the first, what do you make of that? I, at any rate, know that it is not I who must be given credit for this shot. It shot, and it made the hit. Let us bow to the goal as before the Buddha. That's the end of the story. And I'll tell you why I am doing it this way. But first of all, you have to know Carl Jung, the great psychologist. He was a pillar in psychology. He was also very interested in Eastern philosophy. He studied a lot of it. On his deathbed, and Steve Pankowski sent me an article on this, but I had read it before. On his deathbed, the last thing he did was he dictated a letter to a monk in a monastery that he knew. And in that letter, he said he was dying. He died shortly after he said these words. He said, I know now what it is. So he had struggled with it all these years also. And I'm bringing it to you because what we're trying to do as coaches is put it into our players and into ourselves, by the way. And like the master said, no one can help you. This is something you figure out by yourself. And believe me, I have a sense of what we might be talking about, but I've got maybe 10 to 15 years of experience of working, of trying to, when I say working, I'm talking about struggling with the concept. But the concept is there, and it does work. And so I know that this probably strikes you as even kind of goofy. And I know a lot of people that know me do think that way. But now things have changed. Now scientists have become involved, because the reason they can now be involved at this deep level, though probably over a century ago they were starting, but now they've got the technology. Now they can see into the brain without any type of cutting people or any kind of invasion at all. And so now they're finding out things that they didn't believe in. And the biggest thing they have found out is this, that the brain is not set. All these years, all the doctors and everything have been saying, you can't change the brain. This is the way it's going to be all your life. It's not going to change. And eventually you'll start losing cells because you're deteriorating, and you can't stop that. Eventually you will, before you pass away, you will be mentally very weak. Well, they're now found that the brain can be changed and changes itself constantly, and that you can go into 100 years old and your brain is still be intact. It replenishes any cells that are lost. Now they're really knowledgeable about it. This ability of the brain to change itself is where we are getting close to what we're talking about. Let me try to explain that. The brain can actually take from one part of the brain, the brain, and I'm going to show you a picture of it right now. It'll come up. I hope it doesn't block you yet. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. That's the brain, what it looks like. But all of these parts in here and in here have a purpose. There are special parts of the brain that say, let's say, take care of working with fear. Another part that works with enthusiasm. I'm using those terms. It's got kind of delegated parts. Well, what they have learned now is that if one part is short, somehow the brain can use another part of the brain that isn't. And it goes back to this, and we've all heard this statement, but now the scientists are really finding out how the brain operates. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Because if you overuse one part of your body, and I'll give you an example in a little bit, that part of the brain not only stays the same size, but actually gets bigger. But it gets bigger because the part of your body that isn't using anything, they start working to get that over to that other part of the brain. Here's an example, violinists. Violinists, if they're right-handed, they play with their left hand. They use the left hand incredibly. The right hand just slides that bow across. Well, when scientists can now see into the brain, actually while they're using it, what happens is the part of the brain that has the left hand, and it could be the right hand part of the brain because that's the way it's set up, gets very big. But where the right hand is gets very small. So maybe that will give you an idea, but it's much more complicated than that. I don't want to complicate it too much. But that's going on all the time. Now, most of you will probably remember when I read to you the story of Kenny Griffin Jr. catching what looked like a home run on the dead run. And the scientist described all of the things that were going on in the mind for him to do that. And that's where we come in. That's what we're dealing with that. You can try this on your own. If somebody's 10 feet away from you and throws you a ball, say your hands are on your lap and you're not expecting it, yet in the length of the time that ball takes to get there, which is maybe less than a second, your hand responds and catches it. Well, in order for you to do that, in that length of time, the brain, first of all, has to know the ball's coming. They learn that from the eyes. They can learn it from the ears, but that stimulates a kind, I don't want to say an electric type of movement through the outlet to the brain, because it isn't, but it's like that to the brain. The brain then determines how to do it, how to get the hand up and catch it. That happens in less than a second. They're able to do that. It's phenomenal. But can you see the impact of that for us? In the book I'm writing, I make this statement: coaches train minds. They don't train bodies. It's hard for a lot of coaches to grasp that. They keep saying muscle memory. It isn't muscle memory. The muscles are dead issue. They're nothing. The brain is what is being trained and memorizes. Now, the way that you can see the main, and listen, this is how remarkable it is. And doctors who have actually seen the brain tell me it's like mishmash. It isn't solid like you see in a picture. And it's all kept in because of the small heads we got. That's how much room it's got. So it's got to be very, very plastic, and it has to be very, very smart to be able to do all these things. Let me give you an example in an issue area that will surprise you, and you may not believe me, but it is true. Pain. You have pain. And I know you think, well, my knee is giving me a lot of pain. And so you treat the knee. Well, one of the scientists that came up, learned about this, was a man that, he was a scientist, but he had a terrible injury. And he was left in a field, not by himself, but no medical help. And the ambulance took a long time getting, he was in terrible, terrible pain. But he remembered, why this pain and how to handle it. If you can quiet yourself completely when you're in pain, no movement at all, the pain will go away. Hard for you to do that, but it'll go away. And that's what he had to do. Because your body doesn't have any pain. When you go in for an operation, they put you under. I've had a number of them. I always thought they were numbing my body. They're not numbing your body. The body doesn't have any feeling. It has none. It's a piece of meat. The brain is where the feeling is. What they do, and I never knew this, when they give you that stuff that knocks you out, what they're doing is stopping all transmission between the brain and your body. The brain can't send anything. No, the body can't get anything into the brain. Now, what is left is a body that is absolutely valueless. It's just a piece of meat. It feels no pain. And that's why they can now, do their operation. Amazing when you think about it. But I'm giving you this information to show you the power that's in your brain. And you all got one, and you all got the same brain. That's another thing. A lot of talk about Einstein and his terrific brain power. They thought that he must have a huge brain. Well, when he died, there was a lot of discussion. A lot of people didn't want them to take his brain out, but a guy did. The guy who he did it and hid it. It wasn't available for many years. Einstein's brain was smaller than most brains. It isn't the size of the brain. It's all these connections and how you use them that is the important thing. This is really mystic stuff. Really is. And now when you throw in some of the things that can be done, and you throw in the spiritual element, it gets even more complicated. I don't want to go there, but I'm going to show you one more picture just because I want you to get an idea of this. These are called, this is probably the best picture. These are called dendrites. Now, listen, I'm no scientist, and I don't want you to think I am. I've spent time trying to learn this. This is what carries all that information. They're molecules and made up of cells. There are over 1 trillion cells in our body. But these are all the different kinds of dendrites, they're called, for different things. But this is pretty much a common one here. And they go from one dendrite to the next. As a stimulus comes up, they go to, it's a kind of a chain. And that is important in what we'll talk about. They don't touch. This is, they always thought it was some kind of electrical, but they don't touch. They come just close, and it goes on to the next one up. And it sounds clumsy, but it goes at the speed of light, probably faster than the speed of light. And our job is to train our player's mind so it does that effectively. And you can only do that by training the mind, not the body. And so, well, now we get to a little different area, but it's all tied into the final effort. We have a brain. I've shown you the pictures, and that's what it is. But there's another aspect to it, and the scientists can't even figure this one out. In this book, says it exactly: train your mind, change your brain. In order to change your brain to work for you, you got to train your mind. And no one knows exactly what the mind is. There's no, it's not physical. They can't see it. The only thing we know, two things. One is there's consciousness. We know that this is what we think makes up the mind. When I say we, I'm talking about people in general and the scientists. They don't know how it does that. But your thoughts that are going on in your head constantly, which are really not helpful to you, they keep you conflicted because you got so many different ideas going through there. You have to learn how to control that. And players have the same thing. You have to understand that when you're teaching them or you're working with them. But we call them a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. A subconscious mind is what I prefer. They're two different things. The conscious mind is you're thinking all the time and how I'm able to talk. The subconscious or unconscious mind doesn't have the ability to do that. What is a massive memory bank. It remembers everything that ever happened to you since you were born. Everything. Everything that you said, everything somebody said to you. And somehow, which is very difficult to explain, it can bring messages to your brain that end up probably being in your conscious mind that can show you how to do almost anything. If you can reach it right, it can do anything, but it also can do bad things. If you're telling your mind, your conscious mind, the only way you can reach it, by the way, is through the conscious mind. If you're telling your conscious mind, well, I can't do this, it's too hard, that's what you're going to get back from the mind. You can't do that. And it affects your behavior every day. Just stop and think of how many things you're afraid of. Going through the Boston Celtics mind right now, is probably enough damage done in order to defeat them maybe in the next 2 games. That's what the unconscious mind is thinking, because all that time you're getting your ears pinned back by 40 some points, I think it was, that's going through your mind. It isn't the good things going through your mind, your conscious mind, and that's what the unconscious mind works from. All your fear and all your lack of hope. And now we're getting to the application, because that's the place you have to work. You know, I've made this statement to you in Basketball Talk Pro. You're your best friend, but you're also your worst enemy. And it's when you fill your mind with defeat, and we all do it, and we all are guilty of it. But if you can get by that, then you can do marvelous things. And I have personally, I'm not going to go into them, but personally, I have experienced everything I'm talking about here. I have gone through it. Now, there is a way. It's called suggestion. You make suggestions through your conscious mind. Your conscious mind can make suggestions to the unconscious mind, and that accumulates through the years. But you can purposely make suggestions that are positive, and basically it says you got to make more positive ones than you do non-positive ones. Otherwise, you're going to be very fearful. You're going to doubt everything, and you're going to doubt yourself. You won't escape that. What you can do is train your mind, your conscious mind, with good things, with positive things, everything from love to joy to confidence. And then that will be pretty much how you live your life. Some people do that, probably natural, but I doubt it. I think they probably had parents or friends or something like that close to them that they believed in, and they became very positive people, optimistic people. And those people tend to get a lot done because they're feeding their unconscious mind correctly. Well, there was a man. Actually, this stuff with the mind has been around for, like I said, 2,500, 3,000 years. All those guys, all those ancients. When you read them and study them, I'm going to tell you something. You never hear, no matter the master, for example, in this story, never talked to them about physical, just talked to them about mental. You can go back to before Christ, and those people only dealt with the mind. They didn't deal with the body, physical. They just took that for granted. They didn't care whether you were slow or couldn't jump. They still trained you because they knew that the mind was more important to them than those things. So it went on and on and on through the years. Then along came this guy, Emile Coué. He was a doctor around the end of the 1800s and just before, in the early 1900s. He could cure people of any illness almost that other doctors could not cure. They gave up on him. But he could cure them. And he did it without medicine, and he did it without operations. He did it with the mind. Well, he opened up a whole new avenue. And you can do it too. You could do it tomorrow if you wanted to, if you knew what exactly to do. And he tells you in this book. Here was a guy that treated all these people, and he would get them to do things as if you read the miracles of Jesus, healing people. He could do the same thing. And he did. And he did it almost the same way. He took no money. Everything was free. It got to the point, and he lived in a little town. The word started coming. He was in France, by the way. I forgot to tell you that. He was a doctor in France. He lived in a very small community. But they did have for that time, pretty nice facility. It got so big that people would have to sit because he would treat all day long this way. But people had to sit in kind of an auditorium, wait their turn, and was always full. And he treated them right in front of the rest of the crowd. He did it all should explain this. As a doctor, he began to be interested in hypnotism, and it started with hypnotism. And the hypnotism is a very scientific thing now. I mean, you can go to hypnotism any place. I mean, they're advertising, but they're doing basically what they're doing is they're going beyond the fear and get rid of all of that, and they get you thinking in a certain way, and then the brain ends up with this how you're feeling, and they make adjustments. He says in here that and he's talking about the brain. The brain can heal you in seconds if it has the right directions and the right feeling. But the one thing that it can't accept is doubt. If you doubt, it can't do anything for you. But if you are strong in your feeling, it will work for you because he thinks that's what you really want. It'll find, you don't have to, he doesn't even describe some of the ailments. It'll find the ailment and make an adjustment right there. He does it in seconds, minutes. Well, like our society, and it's getting worse now, I think, he came to the United States, this guy, Emil Coué, and in the early 1900s, because the whole world had heard of him. And he came and people mocked him, called him quacks. It was a very disastrous event. It had spilled into all kinds of places. He did what he came to do. He healed all the people, but the people didn't believe it. So he left kind of in shame, but there were some people that believed it. And they began to wonder if all of this stuff that we've been believing all these years was correct. And he does it with a kind of a combination of statement and something close to mantra, which, by the way, is mantram, not mantra. Our Western society has always got to shorten things, but it's really mantram. And he will, like, for example, he will give them a statement. I desire to be such and such, and I'm going to be that way right now. And then he will say to them, just as like Jesus said, get up and walk. And they'll get up and walk. People that were in wheelchairs. I mean, I know that right now you're thinking, oh, yeah, I can't believe all of this. But it happened. We have to believe it. Because now scientists are doing that. They have, but it took a long time to change their thinking. But he was one of the people that they go back to because he was the one guy that they could not deny. He was doing it. So I'm going to give you some modern day stories now. Because this is what you got to find out for yourself. But the same man, a psychologist that had the accident and learned to silence himself. The reason that you have pain, by the way, I skipped over that. The reason you have pain is because the brain is telling you, don't move. They're not stopping the pain. They're just telling you, you've gone far enough. If you go farther, you're going to do more damage. Pain is done to keep you from doing something more damage, basically. That's what the brain does. It's pain. I remember when I was just a young boy, maybe ninth grade or something like that, going to a dentist, which, in those days it was just fearful to go. And I sat down and he was doing a filling. And he said, do you need Novocaine? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, I just want to tell you something. It's kind of dangerous to take Novocaine because it's cutting off those messages too, by the way. Because while I drill, I don't know I have no way of knowing if I'm hitting a nerve and doing more damage because you can't tell me. But if you don't take Novocaine, you can direct me then, stop, by yelling and stuff. Then he knows he was wrong. And so that's what pain does. It's just a message to you to not do anything more. If it's severe enough, like Leonard, the pain won't go away until it's healed. You think that's fairly obvious, but really what's happening is that it isn't that if there's any healing more so than that, but they know, the brain knows when you shouldn't be playing on it, and it'll keep the pain there until it's proper to use it. You can't get around that. Or Roberts, for example. Do you remember him? And now he's dead, but he's a great basketball fan. We played them when he was still alive. And I talked to those coaches and said, can he really do all that stuff he's doing? And he said, the coach showed me, he said, well, Ron, I'm not going to tell you he can or he can't, but I tell you what I've seen. We had a player, our best player, that was completely out for probably 4 or 5 games. And we had a tough schedule. He loves that team. He came to me and he said, let me have a try at that guy. And he took him into a room. Nobody knows what went on in there. The guy walked out. He was perfectly healed. Played all those games. What he did is what Emil Coury is doing. Well, a lady came to him one day. She was so crippled and in so much pain that she could hardly maneuver. Body was all bent over, walking in a walker. She had been in pain for 10 years. That doctor took her and he made pictures like I showed you of the brain. And then he said, he showed her how to talk to the brain, to those dendrites, so that they would bring the messages correctly and then get help from other parts of the brain to take away this pain. It took her, I think it was 3 weeks of constant mental work. But then she began to see some lessening up of the pain. And I think it was about 6 to 8 weeks she was able to walk. And in something like half a year of training, she was completely cured. No doctor, all the doctors said there's nothing we can do. I'm very knowledgeable about that. I have a balance problem that came from an infection. Nothing I did. The doctors told me that not more than 3 years ago. The best doctor on balance that in the United States told me, sorry, I can't do anything about it. You just have to learn how to live with it. He was wrong. I'm doing something about it. I'm getting my balance back. I walk almost normal now. I can't stand on one foot yet, but I'm trying. And so if they can do this kind of thing, and they've done, and there's all kinds of examples. These 2 books are nothing but examples of what the mind can train. Basically, it's nothing more than what I've talked about, mental practice. That's what it is. That's exactly how this doctor taught that lady to mentally practice. And, you know, I've seen, as you know, some of you know at least, that I did my master's thesis in mental practice a long time ago. But since then, I've had a lot of different experiences. In my book, and I've said this in Basketball Talk Pro, but I had a player with such a bad knee that the doctor said he wouldn't last 3 weeks in the beginning of the season. And I asked him what I could do, and he said, the only thing is don't practice them. And I didn't. But he mental practice. I taught him how to mental practice. He would sit and practice, and whatever I taught the players, an offense or how we were going to play a team, he mentally practiced it. We had a way. Well, he played in every game of that season. He led our team in scoring. He led our team in rebounding, and took a team that the year before I got there was 8-28. He took that team, and we were 28-8 and went to the national tournament. The next year, he went down in the first half of the game, never played again. But just being able, can you see the power of this? You have a player injured, you might be able to get him back in half the time that the doctors are going to tell you. But at least you could have him practicing mentally so he loses nothing. You know, instead of having a guy out for 3 weeks and all that time he's losing things, he can keep going by mental practicing. Grant Hill came to me when I was with Orlando because he knew I had worked with Z in Cleveland. They had talked, and Z had told him, you know, you got a guy on your staff, the guy that took me through all of this. And he came to me one time and said, you know, because he'd been laid off for 2 years with an injury, he said, I'm having trouble. My drive is very important to my play, and I'm having trouble with that because I can't dribble. And but he said, you know, I can't. We go on games, and I can't really get any practice time in it. I do what I can. I said, Grant, have you ever mental practiced? And he said, I've heard about it. I told him what to do. I won't say I can't. You'd have to talk to Grant whether he felt that much better. But I know he was capable. It wasn't long before I didn't think he was having any problem driving, because he certainly was scoring off a score of driving, and then went on to another 3 or 4 years of playing. So I'm going to leave it with that and let your questions come. But I do want to say this. If you go to mental practice, which I would encourage all of you to do, first with yourself. Second of all, you can do it as a group or you can do it as an individual. For example, let me give you an example of team play. You could take our screen away drill. It would be very easy to have your whole team mental practice that as well as physical practice. I'm very confident that you can get just as good mental practicing as you can physical practice on most of your skills, because of one thing. You never miss a shot. You never fail. Failure is your enemy, because you are built so that you're afraid to do things you don't think you are. Players don't like to admit they are, but they are. At the point of when they have to do something, doubt comes in. In mental practice, you never fail. If you take free throws, take them on your own. You can do it yourself. Mental practice, shooting free throws for, say, 4 weeks, and see if you aren't shooting free throws better, and never physical practice all that time. Piano people do this all the time. In mental practice, because they can't physically practice, and it doesn't seem to make any difference whether they're practicing on the piano or sitting in a room someplace mentally practicing on it, because the same thing is happening to your muscles. That's what counts. When I did this thing for my thesis, I took the freshman team. I didn't let them practice free throws. We just mentally practiced free throws. I'd bring them down in a room. It was fairly dark. I'd line them up, and I had pictures up there. I don't know why we did that, but yeah, I don't think you need to, because I asked them to close their eyes and shoot 25 free throws. It was after practice. They were all sweaty, and they had like T-shirts on, I think, as I remember. But I would stand behind them, and I could see the muscles in their legs. You know, just like you'd see when they shot them. I could watch them do that. That's what. At that point, no one had ever thought about that. But I began thinking about it because I could see it happening. I could see those muscles rippling when they were physically going. They weren't doing anything physical, because one of the things you have to do in mental practice, if you're mental practicing a skill, is you can't move any part of your body. You have to completely be silent with your mind, body. You don't move anything. You just stand there or sit there. I demonstrated it on Basketball Talk Pro one time. That's the only way it works, because you then get your muscles to work for you in your mind correctly, because you're not missing shots. You're going to have the right technique. The body will take care of that if you don't mess around with it. But most people do. I got to remember this finger. I got to do that. All those things. That is destructive to the process. So you have available to you coaches everything you need. Yeah, you can practice a drill mentally. If I were you, you have to put that into your your practice time. What's 10 minutes? You got to practice and you got to get them in. Group is tough. You got to have some discipline there. And you got to have, by discipline, I mean, you have to have the kind of discipline that players will listen to you. They may be daydreaming while they're doing this. You can't know that. So you have to have a relationship with your players that when you say something, they want to do it. That's a relationship that not a lot of coaches have. But if you can get that, but groups are tough. Be very careful. Individual, like for example, you have a player that has a weakness. Say it's free throws. Let's take free throws. Let's take Shaq. He could practice mentally 100 free throws a day and never miss because he could see the ball go right into the basket. Now he's training his mind to his brain what to do correctly. You don't talk to him about technique because the mind is going to take care of all of that. And I've said this. I have a lot of people that can't understand it, but in 50 years, I've never corrected a shooter. I've never corrected technique. Never. I take what they got. This is the way you want to shoot it. Look at that kid from UCLA. They're all talking about a shot he's got. He's got great technique in my mind for him. He has probably not been bothered by a coach. I hate to say this, but coaches love to show people how to shoot. I shudder every time I see that. Just let them shoot enough and they'll take care of all of that. That's what the brain does. You don't have to get involved in that. So that's where I think this is important to us. And the more we know, and it takes a lot, but we've got to know it in a way that it's simple enough for coaches to use it with players. Okay. I'm going to open it up now, but I know I got to say this. Mental practice or any of the things that are involved with, I told you, takes incredible concentration. You got to be able to, you have to be able to concentrate very hard. You need to work on that. It takes independence because a lot of people are going to tell you you're wrong. Why are you doing that? Or making fun, or so maybe they innocently disturb you. You've got to be able to say, I don't give a damn what those people think. I'm doing this because I want to get better. And you have to be egoless. You have to be like Jesus, who just said, I'm nothing, but here's what I got to say. You got to feel like that because you're now not being the man and getting it done. You're handing it off, but it's still part of you. You have to put yourself in the back burner. Okay, anything, I know that got a little bit long, but it's shorter than I thought because I had a lot to say. Go ahead. You probably are going through a lot of thinking, but don't hesitate to ask, because that's what is good about this style of talking over the Basketball Talk Pro. We got a chance to discuss something.
Ron,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Dick Lean. We've talked a lot about mental practice, which is all good stuff. What part then does the physical repetition of, say, shooting the basketball play in the role of improvement?
Well, you have to do physical practice. I mean, you have to play physically in order to, and most of these things you would do. I look at mental practice with physical practice as a strong supplement. And in some cases, I think it's the stronger of the two areas. But you still have to physical practice. Pianists who do a lot of mental practice the same thing. One of the greatest pianists, classical pianists in our history was Glenn Gould. He lived on mental practice because his arms got so sore that he couldn't hardly practice. But he also physically, here was his, my daughter is in this, so I know all of these. When you do, they have to do a piece by memory. The book is that thick of music, and yet they have to memorize that. What he would do is, if he had 6 weeks, say, to perform, he would spend 4 weeks mental practicing, and then the last 2 weeks physical practicing. But when he walked in, his father relates this. He would watch him. He could walk from his bedroom, I think is where he did the mental practice. When he was ready, he would walk right into the piano and play the whole piece, like he'd been practicing physically for 4 weeks. He had never touched the piano. Couldn't, because of you don't know how terribly vicious piano players have with their arms, because of the fingers are just flying, that's, so I think you need both, Dick. I don't want to say I mean, in the case of the guy I had, it was the only thing he could do. But I want to tell you, but you see, we were playing too. So he was working physically with it at the same time. But the only thing we did with him physically, we would, the day of the game, if we had a shoot around, and we usually did, or the night before, we would run the offense without defense with him in there for about 10 minutes, not forcing him at all. But that's all. That's the only time he ran the offense. It's like 10 minutes, maybe a week. I think I can recall one time that we had a defensive situation that I wanted to make sure he understood, and we walked through that. We didn't run through it or try to defend anybody. We walked through what his assignment would be. But still, he was playing games, so he was getting physical practice as well. But I think it's I would not give up physical practice. Believe me, Dick. I uh, because when you mental practice, even if you're mental practicing team things, which is very good for team play, you still have to be able to play with your teammates, you know, and so you need to incorporate that too. I think of it as a very strong addition to what you're doing. That answer it, Nick? It's a good question.
Well, yes. Just a follow up. Could you expand a little bit on the one you've said in Basketball Talk Pro, and I've many times or more than once, about the single the only shooting drill that you ever used, and you had the player at West Texas who went in the NBA. I can't think of his name right now, who was a not a very good shooter, but you worked with him throughout a summer, I guess it was, and you said you never made a coaching correction on his shot. You worked with his mind, but you did repetition. You worked with the making 50 rounds of rotations of 15 shots and 10 free throws. I don't know exactly how to phrase my questions, but how did you blend in the physical repetition with the mental preparation
in that drill?
During this drill?
Yeah. Well, I talked very little. But what I talked about, I never talked about technique. I haven't talked about technique in shooting in 50 years. But what I talked to him about were things like concentration. For example, this is, I can't tell you exactly, Dick, because it happens at the time I'm doing it. But for example, we would shoot those 15, it's with movement, and it's physically difficult. By the time you get to your 11th shot, from 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, are usually where most players have their misses. So I would talk to him if at times about that. Now when you get towards the end, you're tired. That's going to affect your shot. You must concentrate harder. You learn in this drill that you got to sharpen your focus on those shots. That's one thing. I would talk to him a lot about, the drill is built to put the focus on results, not on means, because they're trying to reach a goal constantly. And as the goal gets reached, you have to reach another one. And that gets them so focused. If they're certain guys, like Maurice Maurice got so bad. At one time I told him, we have to cut back. He got so mentally embroiled in this that he was working at 11, 12 o'clock at night on with this stuff. I told my wife, I said, I'm afraid the guy I'm overdoing it, but I wasn't overdoing it. He was overdoing it. Z was the same way. He, at first it was okay, but as that score kept going up from 8 to 9 to 10 to 11 and 12, he got so obsessed that he was dangerous to be around if he didn't make the score he thought he should. He kicked the ball up against our practice ceiling so many times and knocked those things out up there because if he missed one shot that he shouldn't. But here's another thing, Dick, on that shooting, on that part of it, and this is mental too. Here's what I don't care whether I've done this with, for a friend, I took his 12-year-old son, and everybody starts around 8. It's, no matter whether I'm in the NBA or college, or that's where most of them start, is at 8 makes out of 15. To go to 9 is not a real tough step. To go to 10 is a real tough step. I go to 11, and finally going to 12 is the ultimate. But during that time of going from 8 to 12, never did I see a player make all 15 shots in one round, and none of them. And Z is a damn good shooter, as you know. But still, he wanted to get better. But once they made 12, they would make all 15 easily, many times. It was confidence. Now they just believed they couldn't miss. When you're making 12 out of 15, you're not missing much. And now their mind was, this is, we can do this. They just kind of beamed after that. I mean, they loved making those 15s. And that's where he would get all upset with himself and start kicking balls and yelling. And he never cursed. Well, he cursed, but he never cursed me. But he was cursing everything else. But then all of a sudden it was like peace. Once he made 12, and he could make those 15, it's a remarkable thing that happens. But you see what I'm talking about here? It's just confidence. That's all it is. I mean, you believe in yourself. And now the mind is believing in you also, your brain. That's all I can say about that. But that's a good drill to work on the mind, by the way. Really good drill. But forget about technique. You know what I tell them? Trust in your technique. Whatever that technique is, trust in it. And I want to finish those 2 stories because you started it. Maurice, over the summer, never missed. See, what I told all those players was, we're not going to force you to do this. If you want to do this with us, I will provide you with a coach, one of my assistants or myself. I took Maurice, but Maurice had terrible technique. Guys were telling me all the time, God, you got to do something about that shot. Players made fun of him. They called him something about like a crow. And I would say no. He worked his way out of it. Well, during that summer, my assistants were doing a lot of things. They weren't watching me. Well, occasionally they would, but no big thing. But then when we came back to school, when school started, and they started playing pickup games and stuff, they would say, God, Coach, you look so much better. What did you do? What did you change? And when I told them, I never even talked to him about it, they couldn't believe it. But he did. Now he was looking like a shooter. Z, one of the things that with Z was a good player when I got him, good NBA player. But I talked to him about, first of all, he wasn't a good rebounder. 7'3", he wasn't a good rebounder. And second of all, he didn't shoot free throws very well, 74%. And I said to him, listen, he gets down the last 2-3 minutes, and we need you to score. They're going to put you on line at 74%. But at 80%, they can't afford to do that. And so now they got to guard you, and they can't get as physical with you. Because if they get physical with you and the official blows the whistle and puts them to the line, they're at a big disadvantage. But at 74%, yeah, they take that chance. So we worked on free throws, and we worked on rebounding at the same time. The same way, by the way. And it was about a year later, I read the article in the paper, did a big article on him. Maybe it was 2 years. I think I was at Orlando. And they said, well, you know, you're now the leading rebounder, offensive rebounder in the history of the Cavs. And you shoot over like 81 or 82%. But how did that happen? And here's what he said. He said, Coach Ecker, what's the words? You would know it, but tweaked my shot. I did nothing like that. I never talked to him about it. I did talk to him about rebounding and the importance of being a good free throw shooter. And it did change his game. They now had to play him differently. And he did start going for the ball. See, what I just taught him the drill that I've showed you guys. That's all I taught him. But I got him to think in terms of going after the ball instead of blocking out. And so he started really actively going for the ball in games. And that's all it took to increase his rebounding. But Dick, or coaches, when you get into these things, you're going to find some really miraculous things. I mean, things that just warm your heart. And you know, I'm not a player development guy. I tell everybody that, and I mean it. I think I've worked with maybe 12 players in my life. But I don't do it. They do it. And I guess it goes back to the very story I started with. It's doing it. And, you know, but you have to, you know, it doesn't come without a lot of practice, by the way. That master, you know, had been working at this for 30 or 40 years. But you do see things that really make you wonder. You know, there's no explanation. You talk to Kobe Bryant when he scored 81 points. He literally said that in a lot of the interviews. You know, he didn't hardly know he was doing it. He was, you know, it was just happening to him, not him to the event. And my daughter had an incident when she did her piano recital where she said afterwards, it was great. It was the best she's ever played. And she said, I didn't really even realize what I was doing with my hands. They were like they were on their own. I just let them go and let them do what they wanted to do. And that's part of the secret too, is letting go. And letting the brain. See, the more you think, the more you disturb the brain. It can't have conflicting thoughts. But what happens, do you think, Dick? The bulk, I mean, how many times have you seen a good free throw shooter go to the line at the end of the game when the game's on the line and miss? Because now all of a sudden he's thinking, geez, if I miss this shot, we're going to lose the game, and people are going to hate me, and all of those things are going through the mind instead of what should be going through the mind. Now, some players like Jordan, but by the way, Phil has told me that Michael and Kobe had the greatest concentration and focal of any players he has seen. They were both had that same intense focal focus, but you can't have that if your thoughts are telling you aren't worth a darn. You're going to miss this, or what happens if you miss it. And so that's where you're at, Dick. For the physical, and answer to your question, you still got to stay there.
Okay, I don't want to monopolize the questions here, but just a follow-up. I think this kind of connects a little bit. We talk about players going from reading the defense as a team or individual to feeling the defense. There's got to be a huge mental component to this, and also I would think a huge repetition, physical repetition component to coming to that point where, I think Kobe and Michael do the same. They were feeling what to do and not reading or thinking what to do.
That's right. I don't want players to think.
Okay. From a mental or technique standpoint, going from or working your way from thinking, reading to feeling, what is the mental and the physical process in getting to the ultimate, which is feeling what to do, not thinking what to do?
I can say that in very few words. Consistent repetition.
Define
it's amazing. Go ahead.
Define what is your definition of consistent repetition?
Yeah, we don't. I think I've learned how to do that pretty well with teams. But when I watch coaches that are just beginning to learn things, I see a lot of reduction in that area, that they don't stay with things for a long time. And basically, you need to stay with it forever. And you need to provide players with very selected repetition every day. You can't. The Tai Chi says you'll be best at what you practice most. You'll be worst at what you practice least. But they also say if you miss one day of practice, you go back 3. And I think that's really true. If you want to try all these things out, I say this all the time, no one takes me up on it. Learn to play a musical instrument. You can't succeed without doing the things I'm saying. If I practice every day, I'm again not a good player. I wouldn't play public. I have played publicly, but I wasn't very good. But I practice, because what I'm practicing is consistent repetition. And you're looking at a guy that at one time couldn't hardly blow. It was terribly hard work. But now I can play most songs. I some of them I can play without practicing them, just by reading the notes. I'll give you a better example. I know of a lady who in her 60s, I think she was in her 60s, close to it, well, told me that she used to walk in the gym and there was a little boy in there that was on the basketball team. And he was always shooting free throws. And she talked to him and he said, I practice free throws 15 minutes every day. I don't miss. He turned out to be not only a good free throw shooter, but a good player for it. So she decided, I'll do that with piano. And for 1 year, she didn't miss. She practiced 15 minutes, just 15 minutes every day. And she could play the piano. And now she's continued on and she's now doing recitals. The consistent repetition is amazing to me what you can accomplish. But you got to do it consistently. You can't do it, you know, what I see is you run a drill a couple times and then you go to another drill trying to teach the same thing. And then you lose. They need to do something close to what these things I'm talking about every day. They can't miss, or they set back. And once you do that, it's going to really make a big difference in how they play. That doesn't have to be an hour. You know, if I can't practice, for example, if I'm really busy, like last night, and I was tired, very tired, physically and mentally, but I knew I had to go into that room, shut the door, and take that saxophone out. I just practiced 10 minutes. Sometimes you have to do that. But if you say, well, I can only get 10 minutes in, so it won't do any good, then you start breaking the consistency. Do it every day. If you only do it for a minute, you're better off. But keep yourself in that habit. It's like running. I run 6 days a week. I don't allow myself to miss, because if I start missing, it'll get away from me. And now by having that consistent repetition, things are a lot easier for me. You know, so I think consistent repetition is the key. There is one other thing, Dick, on this feeling thing. You know, I also tell them, I give them the greatest freedom they could have. I take away doubt. I say to them, and I mean it, and I have never broken my promise on this, you cannot be wrong. Don't worry about it. You're never wrong. Just do what you think is right, and you'll never hear a word. And I don't. In the heat of a game, I keep my mouth shut when I know that player out there has tried something because he felt what he should do. And I don't criticize anything like that. They have faith that they can do it. And the words, you can never be wrong, are like magic to them. I mean, really. A little courage for the coach, but Steve, did I see you did you want to raise a question?
When you were talking about the violin, it struck me something that I've seen in my career. When I was an assistant, you know, I always worked for coaches and they practiced right-hand layups equal time to left-hand layups. And I didn't really see progress. So when I started to be the head coach, we started working on left-hand layups, and that's all we would do. We would never work on the right-hand side, you know, where most kids are dominant. And I don't even know if it's true, but I would just tell them, it'll transfer over to the right side. You don't need to practice the right side. Just work with the left, and your muscles will work on the right-hand side. And, you know, I look at our percentages, and I think we were 52% from the left side and 55% from the right side. So it's still a little skewed, but I was pretty happy with those results.
That's a good.
I don't know if it relates to what you're talking about with the mind, but it just.
It does. It is exactly what you were doing. Does relate exactly. There's in these books over here. There is one of the neuroscientists. He was in Alabama, and what he did was, say, the arm was completely useless from an accident. Most doctors would put that arm in a sling. He put the sling in the good arm, which made the person have to learn how to do it with their damaged arm. And but what is happening then, Steve, is the messages that are going to the brain that sees where they're going to do the most work. It goes back to if you don't do it, you lose it. Well, what you did was take their good arm, this person's good arm, away from them. So they had to use the bad arm. And what they did then, what the brain does, it takes away some from that other part of the brain. So each part of the brain has a job to do. The same thing doesn't work for the same, the right arm, to tell you, is in a different part of the brain than the left arm. That's a simple oversimplification. So what you did is exactly what needs to be done. You have to get them using their weakness. And then they will start to form those circuits. They'll start to show those dendrites how, where to go. And then the brain responds. It'll make themselves stronger. It's a great example, Steve. And for coaches, now that's a pretty simple thing, shooting layups. But think of all the other things that we do. And see, basketball, you have to do so many things you gotta, they have to be able to do it without thinking. There is one other thing, though, I'll tell you, and you've heard me say this a lot, but it's in these books too, is that trying to think of the term right now, and I may not be able to call it. I will get it, but and I'll get back to it. But there is one other aspect, and I'll get back to that. I don't want to slow things down because we're going pretty good. Anybody else?
Coach, what would you say you would do initially with a high school team as you're trying to bring the idea of mental practice to your squad? This will be something pretty new for our guys. How would you introduce it to them?
That's a very good question. I'll do the best I can. Some of these things that I don't really think of sometimes the process. I just do it, so it's not something that I may know right off the bat. I had no trouble with college players. In a day, Ron, no one had done this before. I mean, I was like a pioneer in mental practicing. I had never heard of it. I thought this was insane. When this doctor, my supervisor, my whatever you call him, said, I'd like you to do your thesis on mental practice. So he sent me to the University of Nebraska library to find information, just to tell you, I couldn't hardly find anything. The only people who did it was piano players. As I told you, guys that had to take trains because it was before planes and everything. They couldn't take a piano with them. So they had to ride these trains for maybe 18 hours to get to their next, and then maybe have to play the day they got off. So that was the only place I could find anything. So when I went to those college guys, I mean, it was really new. I can't quite remember what I told them, but I did speak to them the first day when we were in a room that I was not disturbed, and I just explained it to them, but I had no way of saying this will work because I didn't know if it was going to work. I did have one advantage. The head coach, the guy I was assisting, was very interested in this. And a guy, by the way, who was a great shooter when he played in college. So he allowed me. I mean, he never questioned me what I was doing. He wanted to be told about what was happening. But we went 6 weeks without shooting a free throw. And I think it was another 3 weeks into games. I'm trying to answer your question for you. I think knowing me, I was very direct and very honest with them. And but I asked them to really, this can help you. We believe this can help you, and really put your heart and soul into it. And they did. I have to say they did. I'm sure there was a couple that I had no way of knowing, but mostly they accepted it. Ron, I think if you approach them, I think your approach now, you've got some things behind you. Somebody's done it. You can tell the same stuff I told. Yep. But I think you have to, as I said before, I think you have to have the kind of discipline with your players that they trust you. And you'd be surprised how many will do that.
Just to interject, I think an area where they're weak too is a good opportunity because, it's easy to get a little bit better. And so once they see some success, they start believing.
Yes, you're dead right. Success does, it's little things. I mean, we do most of these things, by the way, that I've been talking to you. We do them anyway. Let me give you an example. Just what you said about success, and I call it confidence. I used to drive on 80, when I was at Cleveland, which is, terribly busy cross-country highway. But I had to go there to work on my boat. So every day, I would work with, this summer, I would work with Z in the morning. I'd get in my van and I would drive up to where I was going to work on my boat. Then one day, they had big signs up, road work, and you're down to one lane. No problem. I just kept going. Day after day, I kept going. One day, it was backed up, and I stopped, and I was just sitting there because I couldn't go anyplace. One lane, and they had all of these orange things lined up on the edge of the road, not to go over that, pretty close. But I was just sitting there, and I looked down, and I saw where from the edge of the concrete to the ground was like about 14 inches. And I thought, good God, if you went off of there, and there wasn't much room. If you went off of there, you'd probably destroy your car and yourself also, because I was going 55, 60 miles an hour up through there. You know what happened to me? I could hardly steer the car the rest of the way. I was slowed down to almost about 35 miles. And it was just like it was pulling me in that direction because I'd lost, before I had confidence. And then all of a sudden, fear entered in. And so I think the same thing is when we're shooting and doing anything. It's a belief in yourself that you can do it with easily.
When you bring up fear, that's a very difficult thing with high school kids, because you want to direct them into successful areas, and then it becomes they take that as fear. They're afraid of making a mistake then.
Yeah.
For example, there's sometimes you can look at percentages. There's some shots that are not good shots to take. Well, then pretty soon.
Please, Steve.
What's that?
What did you just say in the last part? I didn't catch that.
Like I collect percentages, and I can show them like some shots that they're taking that are not good shots.
Okay.
We're making them at a very low percentage. Well, sure enough, eventually we're going to get a good shot from that spot, and they're afraid. And so it's like you overcoached. I think it's a hard thing with high school kids to teach confidence, but still be smart. Does that make sense?
It's a hard thing at any level. NBA players are the same. You're right. I think, though, once you can understand what we're talking about here, I think you yourself will be a little bit more careful with your words. You can correct without forming fear in them. I mean, there is nothing wrong with correction. What's wrong is when the correction is, bothers them. Some guys correct with their voice and their words that make them feel bad.
Right.
And emotionally, that really hurts them. And coaches, you can get better at that because, I did. I went through all of that. I mean, I think I hurt a lot of players with my correction, and it was an ego thing more than, I wanted to look tough, and I wanted to look, all of those things. Once I got over that, I began to be more sensitive. Once I started seeing some of these things, I became a lot more sensitive to their feelings when I corrected. I believe now I feel pretty good that I correct without fear, without failure, because they got to know when they're doing something wrong. But I think I can do it in a way most of the time that doesn't set them back. Does that make any sense?
Sure.
Yeah. I think what you...
I've noticed the difference too with offense to defense. If defense, you can be a little more harsh with your words because it's usually an effort more than a technique. And with offense, it's more, confidence. You got to play with confidence, and you want to keep positive.
Yeah, and the other thing you got there is they don't like to do it. I mean,
It's work.
Their idea of a good game is 20 points. But my idea of a good game is when they don't let their guy get by them a whole game. And so it's that enters into, I get this question a lot about, I want to answer it for you. Relating with players. The feeling is like in the NBA, the feeling is very strong. You got to have a coach that can relate with the players. So, they will hire an ex-NBA guy because they think that, this guy's, will know the players and he has the feel for them and all of that over a very good college coach, for example. But here's what I've learned. And to say this with all honesty, I don't care where you're at, the NBA or high school or middle school or whatever. If the players know you know what you're doing, they'll accept anybody. They don't care whether you're big, little, fat, skinny, black, white, male, or even female. They want you to help them. They want you to make them better. And if the coach does that, you get that across. Your relationships with any of them are stronger, and they will do what you want them to do, which is what we have to reach. I mean, that's what our job is. That you have to get them to do in a game what you want them to do. A lot of guys can't do that. But what I have witnessed, and I'm talking about the NBA. If the coach doesn't know what he's doing, they're not going to do it. They're going to do what they think will be most effective for the team. And so I don't think you have anything to worry about whether you got a good voice or bad voice. I have not a good voice, but players listen to me. They don't. I mean, they forgot that I don't have a good voice. They don't care. I'm telling them the right things. They don't care what your voice is like or what you look like or anything. What they want from you is good direction. And so if you focus on that, I think you avoid all those problems. I think you just wipe them out. I mean, Phil Jackson can walk into any team in the NBA and it'll change immediately because they know this guy knows what he's talking about. They will listen and they will make every effort to do it. You can take a couple of guys I worked with, put them in the same gym, in the same situation, and you got turmoil because they know. They're smart. They may not be able to verbalize it. They feel it. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. That's where I think the strength of, I think if you know what you're doing and you do it well and you're honest, the players will respond to you. You don't have to worry about all those things. But it's a good point you made. Wow, you've had some good questions, and that's, for me, it's been rewarding because I need to, I'm on a kind of a mission here. I need to know what's going on. I think I know what's going on, but in this area, I need to see. It'll be interesting if you guys say you come up with some good points that you think you want to utilize. How your players and people, that's what I was talking about in independence, because people, more than your players, will find all kinds of faults. And they affect players too, by the way. they can affect players negatively. And so you got to kind of say, I don't give a damn what those people think of me. I'm going to do what I think is right for myself and for the players. Always make your decisions based on what's best for the players over what is best for you. And you won't be wrong. The players will know it. And that will bring you as much success as anything I could tell you.
Going into this this summer, we usually have our teams get together in a summer camp, and it's the new seniors are gone, so the juniors become seniors. You know how it goes. It's just like a new crop of kids every year. One of the things we had talked about as a staff was maybe the first 2 or 3 days, just put the ball out and watch them play for 2 or 3 days and really get a feel for how they interact together.
That's right.
And then start working on the drills. And that's a hard thing to do. I mean, I still want to get into the drills right away. I'm planning in the summer, but I feel like that might be a good thing for them, but even more a good thing for our staff to really see what they're good at, as well as what they're not so good at, and then we can really start coaching them. So I think a lot of the things that you've been saying over this year, I've caught many of your Basketball Talk pros really led us to that kind of conclusion. So I think it's something we're going to try.
I think you read right about doing it that way. I always enjoyed watching them play when they had no structure. Find out, you really find out a lot of things about them. You find out who's passive, who's aggressive, who can make quick decisions, who can adjust to situations on the floor. I mean, you can just learn a ton of lot, and the players have a lot of fun doing that. I mean, look at summer leagues. Jesus, those players play. NBA players, for example, play all summer in all over. Play pickup games. And here's a funny thing: they play and it's rough, and it's they got no officials. They play with no officials, no medical staff there, and they never get hurt. This is what always used to get me. Then we go into training camp, and a week into training camp, I see 8 players sitting out. I'm thinking, what? The difference is this. They don't have a doctor. They don't have a trainer. And so they don't get hurt. Mentally, that's what happens. But once they get in, and those doctors are telling them, you can't do this. Now you be careful about this. Now I see them sitting on the sidelines. But I think playing. Well, I don't have no doubt about this. Playing is their best teacher. Whatever you're playing, however you're playing, it's the best teacher. You got to do it. You got to be out there. This is an answer to your question too, Dick. You know how I feel about this, that you got to be involved. You got to do things. You can't do it verbally. You can't get it done showing. Even film work, as good as we think we are at that, doesn't get it done for the players. What gets it done is out there doing it. And so what you did, Ron, you're going to do, I think you'll find very good things. I wouldn't even worry that much if you never coached them in the summer. Let them play. You learn to do things that you need to know how to do. They will on their own see the things that is not going good for them. they will start to make little adjustments that they don't even know they're making, just like Maurice Cheeks and Zeke. Plus a lot of other guys I've done that with. They don't know they're making these changes, but they're changing because they have to. We do this as individuals all the time, don't we?
Sure.
Things. Think about yourself. How many times all of a sudden you have a skill you didn't even know you had, but it's because you had to learn that skill, whether it was whatever skill it was, whether it was talking, being more aggressive, being more passive. You learn those things through doing, not from books or talks or me, and but by being out there doing it. So I think I love what you're doing with that.
Well, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
Who's that speaking?
Steve.
Oh, okay. My pleasure, and I'm glad I hope you got something out of this. Did not come into this thinking we were going to change the world. I want to get it out. I just think it's important. Coaches begin to think about it, begin to see that some of the things, and it has to go much beyond what I did. You know, I'm not a psychologist. I'm a coach. But Steve Pitkowski said to me one time, he said, you have to learn these things about the mind and then share them with us. And I thought, you know, that's what I should do. Learn what I can and then share it. That's why I did this program today. Because I'm sorry, this is not unusual though. If I could change one thing in coaches, it would become professional. When you're professional, you want to learn constantly. You want to get better every day. I'm surprised to see what some of those coaches like Popovich, Jerry Sloan when he was coaching, and Phil when he was coaching, and how much effort and how much they want to learn. They want to get better. I look at this list that we've got here, and most of the people on the list are veteran coaches. Where are those guys that are just learning? You know, why aren't they here? But we don't have enough professionalism. And it bothers me because who suffers in all of this if we're not professional, if we're not growing constantly? It's the players. Players suffer, and they have nothing to say about it. When these athletic directors and owners and stuff make those decisions on coaches, they're the last people they think about. They don't even, other than, well, they can help you win or whatever. But think of all the coaches, the players that have had to go through life and their seasons with bad coaches. And they're bad coaches only for one reason. They don't work at it, and they're not willing to grow in their profession because it takes work, it takes time. And but how many kids are they hurting? It's got to be hundreds of thousands through the years. So it's a battle that we have to face. And I'm not blaming anybody or saying you're wrong. But it's very obvious that it's happening. And I blame, if anybody I blame, It's the schools themselves and whatever it's college or high school or NBA, that the management doesn't take seriously getting the best coach possible. They don't. They got 1,000 things going through their mind. They say we will not discriminate, and then they just discriminate. And they make so many mistakes because of that. That bothers me, as you can tell. Yeah, I feel sorry for those players. I was fortunate. I had good coaches, and I'm very thankful for that. And you guys, I bet you every kid, when he's been away from me for 10, 15 years, will say the same thing. My coach worked. My coach really wanted to learn. My coaches, and they will, you can, there's a guy by the name of Hill that played for John Wooden. And he hated John Wooden. A lot of John's players did when they were playing for him. He hated John Wooden. Couldn't wait to get away from him. He got away from him. He went in and was very successful. One day he sat down and he said, the things I'm doing are all the things that Coach Wooden talked about. He said, all my success is pretty much determined by what I learned from John Wooden. So one day he was afraid. He hadn't talked to him in like 20 years. He called him up. And he said immediately, Wooden called him by his first name and was real nice to him, and they became fast friends. He wrote a book about this. I can't remember the name of it. He sent me a copy. So, we can play a pretty big role in people's lives, and you guys will go through that. But those guys that are out there, whatever they're doing today, fishing or swimming or whatever, who wouldn't take the time to see what this was about, they're doing an injustice. Anybody else? Well, thanks again, and I hope it helps. We'll see you.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Ron.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Trust me, it was. So I'll just X this out, and if you want to watch the recording, it'll be on YouTube, hopefully by tomorrow,
Sounds
Great.
good.
with the question and answers. I'm saying goodbye now. I'm Xing you out.